The thundering hooves of her mare kicked up dust as Hannah Owens raced across the Nebraska plains, her heart pounding in her chest with equal ferocity. The telegram had arrived just hours ago. Her father was dying. After 5 years away in Boston, she was returning to the only place she'd ever called home, North Platte, Nebraska. But home had never felt so foreign, nor the journey so treacherous. Hannah hadn't noticed when the well-worn trail began to fade beneath her horse's hooves. The endless horizon of golden prairie grass had hypnotized her, memories of her childhood blurring with the landscape. It wasn't until Penny, her chestnut mare, began to struggle, her powerful strides becoming labored and uncertain, that Hannah snapped back to reality. "Easy, girl," Hannah whispered, trying to soothe the increasingly panicked animal. But it was too late. The ground beneath them had changed, no longer solid earth but a deceptive mixture of sand, mud, and water that pulled them down with frightening speed. Quicksand. Hannah had heard tales of it from local ranchers and cowboys, but had dismissed them as exaggerations meant to keep city folk in town where they belonged. Now, as she felt herself sinking, those warnings echoed in her mind with cruel clarity. She flung herself from the saddle, hoping to reach solid ground, but only managed to free her horse. Penny scrambled away, snorting in terror, while Hannah sank deeper, the wet sand already past her knees and climbing hungrily toward her waist. "Help!" she screamed, her voice carrying across the empty prairie. "Somebody help me!" But there was no one to hear her cries, or so she thought. Samuel Reynolds pulled his hat lower to shield his eyes from the setting sun. He'd been tracking a small herd of strays since dawn, and was looking forward to heading back to the Double R Ranch for supper. At 32, he'd spent more than half his life on horseback, and his body ached with the familiar pains of a long day's ride. The scream cut through the quiet evening air like a knife. Sam straightened in his saddle, alert and scanning the horizon. He heard it again, unmistakably, a woman's voice followed by the distant whinny of a distressed horse. Without hesitation, he dug his heels into his stallion's flanks, urging the animal into a gallop toward the sound. As he crested a small rise, he spotted a riderless chestnut mare circling nervously near a depression in the prairie. And there, sunk nearly to her waist in murky quicksand, was a woman with copper hair that caught the dying sunlight like fire. "Hold still, madam," Sam called, dismounting quickly. "The more you struggle, the faster you'll sink." Hannah froze at the sound of his voice, relief and fear mingling in her chest. She watched as the tall cowboy assessed the situation with practiced efficiency. His weathered face betrayed little emotion, but his movements were decisive as he uncoiled the lariat from his saddle. "I'm going to throw you this rope," he called, measuring out a length. "Catch it and hold tight. I'll pull you out." "Please hurry," Hannah replied, trying to keep the panic from her voice. The quicksand had reached her waist now, the cold wetness seeping through her traveling dress and chilling her to the bone. Sam's first throw fell short, the rope landing just beyond Hannah's outstretched fingers. He cursed under his breath, pulled it back, and tried again. This time she managed to grab it, but when he began to pull, she cried out in pain. "Stop! It's pulling me apart!" The quicksand had such a firm hold on her lower body that the tension threatened to tear her in half. Sam immediately slackened the rope, his mind racing through options. There was only one way, and it was dangerous for them both. He'd seen it done once, years ago, when old Pete Henderson had saved a young ranch hand. The older cowboy hadn't survived the ordeal, his heart giving out from the strain, but the boy had lived. "Listen carefully," Sam said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "I'm coming in after you." Hannah's eyes widened. "No, you'll be trapped too." but Sam was already securing one end of his rope to his horse's saddle. He tested it firmly, ensuring the animal was standing on solid ground. Then, with methodical calmness that belied the risk he was taking, he wrapped the other end of the rope around his waist, tying it securely. "When I reach you," he instructed, "wrap your arms around my neck and hold on. Don't let go, no matter what happens." Without waiting for a response, Sam stepped deliberately into the quicksand. He felt the immediate suction, the terrible pull of the earth attempting to claim him. Keeping the rope taut, he moved toward Hannah, each step requiring immense effort. Hannah watched in terrified awe as the stranger fought his way toward her. The quicksand had reached her rib cage now, compressing her lungs and making each breath a labor. The cold was seeping into her bones, and fear threatened to overwhelm her senses. When Sam finally reached her, his strong arms encircled her waist. "Arms around my neck," he ordered, and she complied immediately, clinging to him as though he were the last solid thing in a dissolving world. "Jupiter," Sam called to his horse. "Back up, pull." The well-trained stallion responded instantly, stepping backward with steady pressure. Sam held Hannah tightly against his chest as they began the slow, excruciating process of being extracted from the quicksand's deadly embrace. For a moment, it seemed hopeless. The suction only increased as the quicksand fought to keep its prey. Hannah could feel Sam's muscles straining against the impossible pressure, his breath warm against her ear as he grunted with effort. "Don't give up," he whispered, though whether to her or himself, Hannah wasn't sure. Then, with a sudden release that sent them both sprawling onto solid ground, they were free. Jupiter continued backing up, dragging them several yards from the deadly pit before Sam called for him to stop. They lay there, gasping for breath, covered in mud and sand but gloriously alive. Hannah became acutely aware of the strong arms still wrapped protectively around her, of the steady heartbeat against her cheek. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice barely audible. "You saved my life." Sam's chest rumbled with a soft chuckle. "Just doing what any decent man would, madam." He gently disengaged himself and helped her to sit up. "Samuel Reynolds," he introduced himself, touching the brim of his mud-caked hat. "Everyone calls me Sam." "Hannah Owens," she replied, trying to regain some semblance of dignity despite her bedraggled appearance. "I was on my way to North Platte when I got distracted." Sam's eyebrows rose slightly. "North Platte's a good 10 miles east of here, Miss Owens. You're lucky I heard your call." He glanced at the darkening sky. "Night's coming on fast. My ranch is about 3 miles from here. I'd be honored if you'd accept my hospitality until morning." Hannah hesitated. Propriety dictated she should decline. A single woman did not spend the night at a bachelor's ranch, no matter how noble his intentions. But she was exhausted, shaken, and the thought of continuing her journey in the dark was more frightening than any potential scandal. "I would be grateful," she said finally. "My father is ill in North Platte. I need to reach him as soon as possible." Something in Sam's expression softened. "We'll get you there first thing tomorrow, Miss Owens. You have my word." He helped her to her feet, then whistled for her mare, who approached cautiously. After retrieving Hannah's saddlebags, Sam lifted her onto Jupiter's back, reasoning that his stronger horse would better handle the double burden. He mounted behind her, keeping a respectful distance while still ensuring she wouldn't fall. As they rode toward the Double R Ranch, Hannah found herself strangely comforted by the solid presence at her back. Samuel Reynolds had dived into quicksand to save a stranger. What kind of man did such a thing? She didn't know, but as the adrenaline of her near-death experience began to fade, she found herself overwhelmingly curious to find out. The Double R Ranch appeared on the horizon just as the last light faded from the sky. Unlike the sprawling cattle operations Hannah had passed on her journey west, this was a modest establishment, a sturdy main house flanked by a barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. A windmill creaked lazily in the evening breeze, and lantern light glowed welcomingly from the house windows. "It's not much," Sam said, a note of pride in his voice nonetheless, "but it's mine, free and clear." Hannah felt a surge of admiration. In a land where many ranchers were perpetually in debt to eastern banks, owning property outright was no small accomplishment. As they approached, the front door of the house swung open and an older woman stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her expression was equally stern until she recognized Sam. "Samuel Reynolds, you had me worried sick," she called, lowering the weapon. Her eyes narrowed as she noticed Hannah. "And who might this be, Mrs. Hawkins?" Sam replied, dismounting and helping Hannah down. "This is Miss Hannah Owens. She had an unfortunate encounter with the quicksand in the south pasture. Miss Owens, my housekeeper, Mrs. Eleanor Hawkins." The older woman's expression immediately transformed from suspicion to concern. "Heavens above, child, you're soaked through and filthy. Come inside this instant before you catch your death." Hannah found herself whisked into the house with surprising efficiency. Mrs. Hawkins, despite her apparent age, moved with the energy of a woman half her years, already barking orders at Sam to heat water for a bath while she ushered Hannah toward the back of the house. "Mr. Reynolds is a good man, Mrs. Hawkins remarked as she helped Hannah out of her ruined traveling dress, "but he has no idea what to do with a lady visitor. Imagine bringing you here in this state without so much as sending word ahead." "He saved my life," Hannah said quietly. "I'm grateful for any hospitality." The older woman's eyes softened. "Of course you are, dear. Now let's get you into this bath while it's hot. I'll find you something clean to wear. You look about the size my daughter was before she married and moved to Denver." An hour later, Hannah sat at the kitchen table wearing a simple cotton dress that hung slightly loose on her frame. Her hair was clean and drying in copper waves down her back as she gratefully accepted a bowl of beef stew from Mrs. Hawkins. Sam entered from outside, his own clothing changed and his hair damp from washing. He nodded approvingly at Hannah's improved appearance but maintained a respectful distance as he took his seat at the head of the table. "I've sent one of the hands to North Platte with a message for your father, Miss Owens," he said, accepting his own bowl of stew, "just to let him know you're safe and will arrive tomorrow." Hannah's eyes widened in surprise. "That's very thoughtful, Mr. Reynolds. Thank you." "Sam, please," he insisted. "After pulling someone from Quicksand, I reckon we can dispense with some formalities." Mrs. Hawkins made a disapproving noise, but there was a twinkle in her eye that suggested she wasn't truly scandalized. Over supper, Hannah learned that Sam had come to Nebraska 15 years earlier as a boy of 17, working first as a cowhand before slowly building his own modest herd. The Double R, named for the Reynolds Ranch, now ran 500 head of cattle, a respectable operation for a man working without Eastern investors. In turn, Hannah shared her own story how she'd left Nebraska 5 years ago to attend a women's college in Boston, studying to become a teacher. Her father's telegram had interrupted her plans for the next school term. "I haven't seen him in almost 2 years," she admitted, pushing her empty bowl away. "And now I might be too late." "What's ailing him, if you don't mind my asking?" Sam inquired gently. "His heart, according to the telegram. Dr. Wilson doesn't expect him to last the week." Hannah blinked back tears. "He's all the family I have left." Sam nodded sympathetically. "We'll leave at first light. It's an easy ride to town if you know the way, which I do." Later, Settled in the small but clean bedroom that Mrs. Hawkins had prepared for her, Hannah found herself unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the quicksand pulling her down again, the terrible sensation of being slowly devoured by the earth. Then she would remember the moment Sam's arms had encircled her, his voice steady in her ear, and the terror would recede. She tried to tell herself it was merely gratitude. She felt the natural appreciation of the rescued for the rescuer. But there was something about Samuel Reynolds that stirred her curiosity and interest in ways that went beyond simple thankfulness. His quiet competence, the gentle authority with which he managed his ranch, the respect his housekeeper clearly held for him despite her fussing. These spoke of a character worth knowing better. But Hannah reminded herself that her purpose in returning to Nebraska was to see her father, perhaps for the last time. Whatever interest she might feel in the rancher who had saved her life would have to remain unexplored. Dawn came early on the prairie. Hannah awoke to the smell of coffee and bacon and the sound of men's voices outside as the ranch hands prepared for their day. Mrs. Hawkins had laid out her cleaned and mended traveling dress, a miracle the woman must have worked through the night to accomplish. In the kitchen, Sam was already dressed for riding, his hat resting on the table beside him as he drank his coffee. He stood when Hannah entered, his expression warming. "You look much recovered, Miss Owens," he said. "I trust you slept well." "As well as could be expected," Hannah replied honestly. "And please, after yesterday's shared ordeal, I think you should call me Hannah." A small smile played at the corner of Sam's mouth. "Hannah, then. Breakfast is almost ready, and then we'll head to town." The ride to North Platte was indeed easier than Hannah had anticipated. Sam led them along well-established trails, avoiding the treacherous areas where quicksand might lurk. He pointed out landmarks as they rode the lightning-struck oak where the trail forked, the rocky outcropping that marked the boundary of his property, the distant silhouette of Chimney Rock far to the west. "You know this land well," Hannah observed. Sam nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon as though he could never tire of the view. "A man has to know his land if he wants to survive out here. Every hollow, every rise, every change in the grass can tell you something important, like where quicksand might be hiding." "Especially that," he agreed. "Though even the most experienced can be caught by surprise sometimes. After heavy rains, new pockets form where solid ground used to be." Hannah shuddered involuntarily, remembering. "I didn't mean to frighten you," Sam said quickly, noticing her reaction. "You're safe now." "Thanks to you," Hannah replied softly. "I still don't understand how you knew what to do. Most men would have tried to pull me out with the rope." Sam was quiet for a moment, his expression growing distant. "I saw a man do it once when I was first working cattle here. A young hand got caught in quicksand much like you did. The trail boss, old Pete Henderson, went in after him the same way I did for you." His voice grew somber. "The boy lived. Pete didn't. His heart gave out from the strain." Hannah's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, Sam. You risk that much for a stranger," he shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with her amazement. "It was the right thing to do. Anyone would have." "No," Hannah said firmly. "Not anyone would have. Most would have tried something safer for themselves, even if it meant less chance for me." "You were willing to die to save someone you didn't know." Sam's cheeks colored slightly under his tan. "Let's just say I'm glad it didn't come to that, for either of us." They rode in companionable silence for a while after that, each lost in their own thoughts. As they crested a small hill, North Platte came into view, a growing frontier town that had flourished with the arrival of the railroad. "Your father's place is on the north side of town, isn't it?" Sam asked. "The Owens hardware store," Hannah nodded, surprised. "You know it, of course." Where do you think I get my nails and tools? Thomas Owens runs a fair business. He's well respected in these parts. Pride warmed Hannah's heart. Her father had built that business from nothing after moving west following her mother's death. That he had earned the respect of men like Samuel Reynolds meant more than any fortune he might have amassed. The streets of North Platte were busy with the usual frontier town traffic: freight wagons, riders on horseback, and pedestrians moving between the various businesses. Hannah felt a surge of nostalgia mixed with apprehension as familiar sights came into view. The town had grown in her absence, with several new buildings she didn't recognize, but the core remained the same. Sam guided them directly to the modest two-story building that housed both Owens' hardware and the family living quarters above. As they dismounted, the door opened, and Dr. Wilson stepped out, his medical bag in hand and a grave expression on his face. Hannah's heart sank. "Dr. Wilson." "My father." The doctor's expression softened slightly when he recognized her. "Hannah, my dear, you've arrived just in time. Your father is very weak but still with us. He's been asking for you." Relief and fear battled within her as she hurried toward the door. She paused, turning back to Sam, who had remained respectfully by the horses. "Will you come up?" she asked impulsively. "I'd like my father to meet the man who saved his daughter's life." Sam hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with intruding on such a personal moment. "I should see to the horses, please," Hannah insisted. "It would mean a great deal to me." After a moment, Sam nodded, tying both horses to the hitching post before following Hannah and the doctor into the store and up the narrow staircase to the living quarters. Thomas Owens lay in the bedroom that had been his since Hannah's earliest memories. The robust, vigorous man she remembered had been replaced by a pale shadow, his once powerful frame diminished beneath the bedcovers. His eyes were closed when they entered, his breathing labored. "Father," Hannah whispered, moving quickly to his bedside and taking his hand. Thomas's eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to recognition and joy. "Hannah, is it really you, my girl?" "Yes, father," she replied, tears flowing freely now. "I came as soon as I received your telegram." He squeezed her hand with surprising strength for one so ill. "I knew you would, my reliable Hannah." His gaze shifted beyond her to where Sam stood awkwardly by the door. "And who is this young man?" Hannah motioned for Sam to approach. "This is Samuel Reynolds of the Double R Ranch. He saved my life yesterday when I became trapped in Quicksand on my way here." Thomas's eyebrows rose, and he regarded Sam with newfound interest. "Quicksand, you say? And how exactly did you manage that rescue, Mr. Reynolds?" Sam shuffled uncomfortably. "I went in after her, sir, with a rope secured to my horse." Thomas's eyes widened, and he looked back at Hannah with a question in his gaze. She nodded confirmation. "Well, Mr. Reynolds," Thomas said, his voice strengthening slightly, "it appears I owe you a debt I can never repay. My daughter is all I have in this world." "No debt, sir," Sam replied earnestly. "Anyone would have done the same." Thomas chuckled, the sound turning into a cough that Dr. Wilson stepped forward to address. After a moment, the older man settled back against his pillows, clearly exhausted by the brief conversation. "Hannah," he whispered, "there are papers in my desk downstairs. My will, the deed to the store, bank information. Dr. Wilson knows where everything is." "Don't talk like that," Hannah protested. "You're going to be fine." But Thomas shook his head weakly. "We both know better, my dear. I've held on to see you one last time. Now I can go in peace knowing you're safely home." "Mr. Owens needs rest," Dr. Wilson interjected gently. "Perhaps you could come back this evening, Hannah. And Mr. Reynolds, thank you for bringing her safely to town." Sam nodded, understanding the dismissal. I'll stable the horses at the livery, Miss Owens, and collect your belongings from your mare. Will you be staying at the hotel, or—" "She'll stay here, of course," Thomas said with unexpected firmness. "This is her home." Hannah squeezed her father's hand gratefully. "Yes, I'll stay here. Thank you for everything, Sam." Outside in the late morning sunlight, Hannah walked with Sam to where their horses waited. She felt torn between the need to stay with her father and the desire to properly thank the man who had made this reunion possible. "Will you be returning to your ranch today?" she asked. Sam nodded. "I should get back. Mrs. Hawkins will worry, and there's always work to be done." Hannah impulsively reached out and touched his arm. "I can never thank you enough for what you did. Not just the rescue, but bringing me here in time to see my father." Sam's expression softened, and for a moment, Hannah thought he might take her hand. Instead, he touched the brim of his hat respectfully. "If you need anything at all, send word to the Double R. I'll come." With that promise hanging between them, he mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Hannah to watch until he disappeared around a corner. Only then did she turn back to the hardware store, to her dying father, and to the uncertain future that awaited her. Thomas Owens died peacefully 3 days later, with Hannah at his bedside holding his hand. His last words were of her mother, how he looked forward to seeing her again after nearly 20 years apart. Hannah wept, but there was comfort in knowing he had died content, with his affairs in order and his only child returned to his side. The funeral was well attended, a testament to Thomas's standing in the community. Hannah, dressed in black borrowed from the dressmaker who had been her father's friend, accepted condolences from townsfolk and ranchers alike. Many remembered her from before she'd left for Boston and expressed their hopes that she would remain in North Platte. Samuel Reynolds attended the service, standing respectfully at the back of the gathering with his hat in his hands. He offered brief, sincere condolences afterward, but didn't linger, seeming to understand that Hannah was overwhelmed by the attention of so many well-meaning mourners. In the days that followed, Hannah threw herself into sorting through her father's affairs. She was surprised to discover that Thomas had been more prosperous than she'd realized. The hardware store was free of debt and turning a steady profit. There was money in the bank in North Platte and investments in railroad stock that provided regular dividends. "Your father was a shrewd businessman," Mr. Franklin, the bank manager, told her when she met with him. "He lived simply, but he built real security. The question is, Miss Owens, what do you intend to do with it all?" It was a question Hannah had been asking herself since the funeral. She could sell the store and return to Boston, using the proceeds to establish herself as a teacher there. Or she could stay, hiring someone to manage the hardware business while she perhaps taught at the local school. Neither option felt entirely right. She had changed during her years in the East, no longer the simple prairie girl who had left Nebraska. Yet Boston now seemed distant and foreign compared to the familiar rhythms of frontier life that surrounded her once more. 2 weeks after her father's passing, Hannah was tallying inventory in the store when the bell above the door jingled. She looked up to see Samuel Reynolds removing his hat as he stepped inside, his tall frame seeming to fill the modest space. "Miss Owens," he greeted her formally. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Hannah replied, surprised by how pleased she was to see him. "And it's Hannah, remember?" A small smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Hannah, then. I've come to town for supplies and wanted to see how you're faring." "I'm managing," she said, setting down her pencil. "Everyone has been very kind. It seems my father was well loved here." Sam nodded. "He was a good man, fair in his dealings and generous when folks fell on hard times." Many a rancher got through a bad winter because Thomas Owens was willing to extend credit. Hannah felt a surge of pride. I didn't know that about him. A man doesn't advertise his good deeds, Sam replied. He hesitated, then added, I also came to ask if you've decided whether you'll be staying in North Platte or returning east. The directness of the question startled her. I'm still considering my options. Why do you ask? Sam shifted his weight, suddenly looking less like the confident rancher who had pulled her from Quicksand and more like a schoolboy working up courage to speak to his teacher. I was hoping you might consider another possibility, he said finally. The school near my ranch is in need of a teacher for the fall term. The previous one, Miss Hathaway, is marrying a shopkeeper in Omaha and leaving at the end of this month. Hannah's eyes widened in surprise. You're offering me a teaching position. I'm on the school board, Sam explained. When I mentioned to the other members that Thomas Owens's daughter was college-educated and trained as a teacher, they were very interested. It would be a small school, just 12 children from the surrounding ranches and farms, but it's important work. Hannah considered the offer. Teaching had always been her passion, and the prospect of a small rural school was appealing in many ways, but there was a practical concern. What about the hardware store? I can't simply abandon my father's business. You could hire a manager, Sam suggested. Jim Peterson's oldest boy is looking for steady work now that he's married. He's honest and hardworking, and he knows hardware from helping his father in the forge. Hannah was struck by how much thought Sam had put into this. You've considered everything, haven't you? A flush crept up his neck. Not everything. There's the matter of where you would live. The previous teachers have boarded with families near the school, but he trailed off, seeming unsure how to continue. But, Hannah prompted, Mrs. Hawkins has suggested that you might be more comfortable at the Double R, in our guest room. She's been wanting female company, she says, though I suspect she's just trying to fatten me up with more elaborate cooking than I deserve. The invitation hung in the air between them, its implications clear to them both. While there would be nothing improper about Hannah boarding at the ranch with Mrs. Hawkins as chaperone, it would inevitably lead to speculation about her relationship with the bachelor rancher. That's very kind of Mrs. Hawkins, Hannah said carefully, but I wouldn't want to impose or cause talk. There will be talk regardless, Sam replied with unexpected frankness. A single woman running a business or teaching school will always be the subject of gossip in a small community. The question is whether you let that dictate your choices. Hannah was surprised by his insight. You sound as though you speak from experience, Mr. Reynolds. Sam, he corrected gently. And yes, I've had my share of being the subject of speculation. When I first bought land here, plenty said I was too young and would fail within a year. When I succeeded, they wondered why I didn't take a wife to settle me down. People will always have opinions about how others should live. Hannah nodded thoughtfully. I'll need time to consider your offer, both the teaching position and the boarding arrangement. Of course, Sam agreed readily. The school board doesn't need an answer until next week, and as for living arrangements, that's entirely your decision. He placed his hat back on his head. I should let you get back to your inventory. Good day, Hannah. Sam, she called as he reached the door. When he turned, she added, thank you, not just for the offer, but for thinking of me at all. His expression softened. You're not an easy woman to forget, Hannah Owens. With those words lingering in the air, he departed, leaving Hannah with much more to consider than hardware inventory. That evening, as Hannah sat alone in the small apartment above the store, she found her thoughts repeatedly returning to Sam's offer and his parting words. Teaching had always been her ambition, and the prospect of shaping young minds on the frontier held real appeal. As for living at the Double R under Mrs. Hawkins's watchful eye, the idea was both thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. She had to admit, at least to herself, that she was drawn to Samuel Reynolds in a way she had never experienced with any of the polite, educated young men she'd met in Boston. There was something compelling about his quiet strength, his unassuming confidence, and the moral certainty that had driven him into Quicksand after a stranger. But was attraction enough reason to reshape her entire future? Hannah slept fitfully, dreams of sinking sand and strong arms mingling with images of her father's approving smile. When she woke, she knew what she needed to do. After breakfast, she visited the bank and arranged for a draft of funds. Then she walked to the livery stable and hired a horse and buggy for the day. By mid-morning, she was on the road to the Double R Ranch, her heart beating faster with each mile. Mrs. Hawkins was hanging laundry when Hannah arrived, and her weathered face broke into a broad smile at the sight of the visitor. "Miss Owens, what a lovely surprise. Samuel didn't mention you'd be calling today." "He doesn't know," Hannah admitted, accepting the older woman's help down from the buggy. "I hoped I might speak with him if he's not too busy." "He's out checking fences with the hands," Mrs. Hawkins replied, "but should be back for the noon meal." "You're welcome to wait, of course. Come in and have some coffee. You look like you could use a friendly ear." Inside, the ranch house was just as Hannah remembered, simple but comfortable, with a cleanliness that spoke of Mrs. Hawkins's exacting standards. Over coffee at the kitchen table, Hannah found herself sharing her conflicted thoughts with the housekeeper, who listened with surprising empathy. "It's a big decision," Mrs. Hawkins acknowledged when Hannah had finished. "Staying here means giving up certain comforts and opportunities you'd have in the East, but there are compensations too." "Such as?" Hannah prompted. Mrs. Hawkins's eyes twinkled. "Such as building something meaningful in a place that needs you. Such as the satisfaction of seeing your work make a real difference in people's lives." She paused, then added with studied casualness, "and such as the possibility of a partnership with a good man who would value you for exactly who you are." Hannah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Mrs. Hawkins, I didn't come here to—" The older woman waved away her protest. "Of course not, dear. But I've known Samuel Reynolds since he was a gangly boy of 17, trying to prove himself to men twice his age. I've watched him build this ranch with nothing but his own 2 hands and more determination than sense sometimes. And in all those years, I've never seen him look at any woman the way he looks at you." Before Hannah could formulate a response, they heard the sound of horses approaching. Mrs. Hawkins stood briskly. "That'll be Samuel and the men. I'd best see to dinner." "You're welcome to wait in the parlor if you'd prefer to speak with him privately." Hannah chose to remain in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup as she rehearsed what she wanted to say. When Sam entered a few minutes later, his surprise at seeing her was evident in the way he stopped short in the doorway. "Hannah, is everything all right?" She stood, suddenly nervous. "Everything's fine. I hope you don't mind my coming unannounced. I wanted to give you my answer in person." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "About the teaching position?" "Yes, and other things." She took a deep breath. "I've decided to accept the school board's offer if it still stands. As for living arrangements, I think it would be best if I found lodging in town, at least initially. I can commute to the school until winter makes that impractical." Sam nodded, his expression carefully neutral. "The board will be pleased. The children need a proper education, and someone with your qualifications is rare in these parts." "There's something else," Hannah continued, gathering her courage. "I've decided to keep my father's store but hire young Mr. Peterson to manage its day-to-day operations, as you suggested. However, I'd like to propose a business arrangement with you, Mr. Reynolds." Sam's eyebrows rose slightly. "A business arrangement?" "Yes." Hannah reached into her reticule and withdrew the bank draft she'd obtained that morning. "This is a loan from me to the Double R Ranch to be used for expanding your herd and improving your facilities. In return, I would become a silent partner in the ranch, entitled to a percentage of the profits proportional to my investment." Sam stared at the draft, then back at Hannah, genuine astonishment on his face. "That's a considerable sum, Miss Owens. Why would you risk it on my operation?" "Because I believe in you," Hannah said simply. "You've built something valuable here, and with additional capital, you could build something truly exceptional. My father always said that the future of Nebraska lies in its ranches and farms. I'd like to be part of that future." Sam seemed at a loss for words, an unusual state for a man normally so self-possessed. "This is unexpected. I'll need to think about it." "Of course," Hannah agreed. "It's a business decision and should be considered carefully by both parties." Mrs. Hawkins, who had been pretending not to listen while preparing vegetables at the sink, snorted softly. Sam shot her a quelling look before turning back to Hannah. "Would you stay for dinner? We could discuss the terms of your proposal." Hannah agreed, and the meal that followed was a curious mixture of serious business discussion and lighter conversation, with Mrs. Hawkins occasionally interjecting pointed remarks about the advantages of partnership in all areas of life. By the time Hannah prepared to return to town, she and Sam had sketched the outline of an agreement that would make her a one-third partner in the Double R, with Sam maintaining operational control. As he helped her into the buggy, Sam held her hand a moment longer than necessary. "You've surprised me today, Hannah Owens. I'm beginning to think there's a shrewd businesswoman behind those teacher's spectacles." Hannah smiled. "My father taught me more than I realized. Perhaps we can both honor his memory by building something worthwhile here." "Perhaps we can," Sam agreed, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Safe journey back to town. I'll have the formal partnership agreement drawn up by the end of the week." As Hannah drove away, she felt a curious mixture of exhilaration and trepidation. She had just committed a significant portion of her inheritance to a cattle ranch run by a man she barely knew. By any rational standard, it was reckless. And yet, she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so certain about a decision. There was something right about tying her future to this land, to the community her father had loved, and if she was honest with herself, to the possibility of knowing Samuel Reynolds better. Summer faded into autumn, and Hannah settled into her new routines. Mornings and early afternoons were devoted to teaching at the small schoolhouse, 3 miles from the Double R. Evenings and weekends, she divided between overseeing the hardware store's operations and learning about ranch management from Sam, who took his responsibility to his new business partner seriously. The partnership flourished as Sam used Hannah's investment to purchase additional breeding stock and improve the ranch's infrastructure. Hannah found herself increasingly drawn into the day-to-day decisions of running a successful cattle operation, her natural intelligence allowing her to quickly grasp concepts that had taken others years to master. Their professional relationship developed a comfortable rhythm, but beneath it ran an undercurrent of mutual attraction that neither openly acknowledged. There were moments a hand lingering during a shared task, eyes meeting across a room, conversations that stretched long into the evening when Hannah felt certain that Sam's feelings matched her own. Yet he maintained a careful distance, never overstepping the boundaries of propriety. Mrs. Hawkins observed their dance with thinly veiled impatience. "That man," she confided to Hannah one Saturday afternoon as they prepared vegetables for supper, "is the most stubborn creature God ever put on this earth. He's been sweet on you since the day he pulled you from that quicksand, but he's convinced himself that speaking his mind would somehow be taking advantage of your business relationship. Hannah felt her cheeks warm. Perhaps he doesn't feel as strongly as you imagine, Mrs. Hawkins. The older woman snorted. Nonsense. I've known that boy since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. When he loves deeply. He's just afraid of rushing you or making you uncomfortable. Samuel Reynolds has never been one to put his own desires ahead of others' well-being. As autumn deepened toward winter, Hannah found her living arrangement in town increasingly impractical. Early snowfalls made the road to the school treacherous, and on more than one occasion, she was forced to stay overnight at the Double R when weather made the return journey impossible. After one particularly harrowing trip that left her horse lame and Hannah herself chilled to the bone, Sam put his foot down. "This is madness," he declared as he helped her out of her sodden coat in the ranch house entryway. "You can't continue commuting from town until spring. It's not safe." "What alternative do I have?" Hannah asked, teeth chattering despite the roaring fire in the hearth. "The children need their teacher." "Stay here," Sam said firmly. "Mrs. Hawkins's offer still stands. The guest room is yours for as long as you need it." Hannah hesitated, aware of how such an arrangement would be perceived in the community. "People will talk." "People already talk," Sam countered. "Half the county is convinced we're secretly engaged anyway, thanks to our business partnership. At least this way you won't risk pneumonia or worse trying to prove them wrong." Mrs. Hawkins, arriving with a steaming cup of tea, added her own persuasion. "He's right, dear. Besides, I'm getting too old to chase after him and these cowhands all by myself. I could use another woman in the house." Faced with their united front and her own practical nature, Hannah relented. The next day, Sam himself drove to town to collect her belongings and inform the school board of the change in her living situation. If there were raised eyebrows or wagging tongues, he gave no indication upon his return. Life at the Double R settled into a new pattern. Hannah taught during the day, helped Mrs. Hawkins with household tasks in the evening, and often sat with Sam after supper, discussing books or ranch business by the fire. The forced proximity should have been awkward, but instead felt natural, as though the three of them had always shared this domestic arrangement. As Christmas approached, Hannah found herself happier than she had been since before her father's death. The small schoolhouse was decorated with paper chains and pine boughs, the children excited about the holiday program they were preparing. The ranch was prospering despite the winter weather, and Hannah's investment was already showing returns beyond her expectations. Only one thing troubled her. Despite their growing closeness, Sam maintained an emotional reserve that Hannah couldn't penetrate. At times, he seemed on the verge of speaking more personally, only to retreat into safer topics of conversation. 2 days before Christmas, a package arrived for Hannah from Boston Books and letters from her former classmates at the Women's College. Among them was a note from James Harrington, a professor of literature who had once courted her with his father's blessing. His words were warm and hinted at continued interest should she ever return east. Hannah read the letter at the kitchen table while Mrs. Hawkins prepared dinner. The older woman noticed her pensive expression. "Bad news from home, dear." "Not bad," Hannah replied, folding the letter. "Just a reminder of a different life I might have led." Mrs. Hawkins nodded sagely. "We all have those roads not taken. The question is whether we regret the path we chose instead." Before Hannah could respond, Sam entered, stomping snow from his boots. His face was ruddy from cold, but his eyes brightened when he saw her. "Letters from Boston?" he asked, noticing the scattered mail. Hannah nodded. "News from old friends, and a letter from Professor Harrington." Something flickered in Sam's expression, a tightening around the eyes that might have been jealousy. "The man who courted you before you left." Hannah was surprised he remembered that detail from one of their many conversations. "Yes, he sends his regards and hopes that I am well." "And are you?" Sam asked, his tone carefully neutral as he removed his coat. "Well, I mean, happy with your decision to remain in Nebraska." The question seemed to carry more weight than its simple words suggested. Hannah considered her answer carefully. "I am content with my teaching," she said finally. "The children are a joy, and I believe I'm making a difference in their lives. Our business partnership has been more successful than I dared hope, and I've come to care deeply for the people here." She met his gaze directly. "So yes, I am well, and I don't regret staying." Something in Sam's posture relaxed slightly. "I'm glad to hear it. It would be a poor Christmas indeed if you were pining for Boston and its professors." Mrs. Hawkins muttered something that sounded suspiciously like "stubborn fool" as she vigorously mashed potatoes at the stove. Christmas Eve brought a heavy snowfall that transformed the prairie into a glistening white expanse. The Hands, who didn't have families nearby, gathered in the bunkhouse for their own celebration, while Hannah, Sam, and Mrs. Hawkins enjoyed a quiet dinner in the main house. After the meal, they exchanged modest gifts by the fire: a new scarf Hannah had knitted for Mrs. Hawkins, a leather-bound journal from the housekeeper to Hannah, practical items for Sam from them both. Then Sam excused himself briefly, returning with a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. "One more for you, Hannah," he said, uncharacteristically hesitant as he handed it to her. "It's not much, but I thought you might like it." Hannah unwrapped the package carefully to reveal a small wooden box, beautifully carved with prairie flowers. When she opened it, a delicate melody began to play a music box. "It's beautiful," she breathed, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "I remembered you mentioning that your mother had one before she died," Sam explained. "When I was in Omaha last month on business, I found this in a shop. The melody reminded me of you." Hannah was moved nearly to tears by the personal nature of the gift, and the fact that Sam had remembered such a small detail from their conversations. "Thank you. I shall treasure it always." Mrs. Hawkins, displaying uncharacteristic tact, announced that she was tired and retired to her room, leaving Hannah and Sam alone by the fire. For several minutes they sat in companionable silence, listening to the music box play its gentle tune. When it finally wound down, Hannah closed it carefully and placed it on the small table beside her chair. "I have a confession to make," Sam said suddenly. "I had an ulterior motive in giving you that gift." Hannah looked at him questioningly. "Oh." Sam leaned forward, his expression more serious than she had ever seen it. "I wanted to give you something that might make you think of me, even if circumstances change." "What circumstances might change?" Hannah asked, her heart beginning to beat faster. Sam took a deep breath. "Hannah, I've not been entirely honest with you, or perhaps with myself. Our business partnership has been a blessing in many ways, but it's also been a burden." Hannah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter night. "A burden? I thought the ranch was prospering." "It is," Sam assured her quickly. "That's not what I mean. The burden is that our business relationship has prevented me from speaking plainly about my feelings for you." The air between them seemed to still, the only sound the crackling of the fire and their own breathing. "And what feelings would those be, Mr. Reynolds?" Hannah asked softly. Sam stood and moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hand in his. "The kind that began the moment I saw you trapped in that quicksand, copper hair shining in the sunlight, refusing to give up even when the earth itself was trying to claim you." The kind that have only grown stronger with each day I've known you, your intelligence, your kindness, your determination. He squeezed her hand gently. I love you, Hannah Owens. I have almost from the beginning, though I told myself it was merely admiration and respect. Hannah felt tears welling in her eyes. Why didn't you speak sooner? At first, it was because you were grieving your father, Sam explained. Then, when you proposed our business partnership, I feared that speaking of personal feelings would make you uncomfortable or worse, make you think I had ulterior motives in accepting your investment. He smiled ruefully. And then, I suppose, habit and fear took over. You're an educated woman who could have her pick of sophisticated men in the East. Why would you choose a rough rancher whose formal schooling ended at 14? Hannah reached out to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Because that rough rancher is the most honorable, courageous, and genuinely good man I've ever known. Because he dived into quicksand to save a stranger without thought for his own safety. Because he's built something meaningful with nothing but his own 2 hands and sheer determination. Her voice softened. Because he remembers the small details that matter, and because when he looks at me, I feel truly seen for the first time in my life. Sam's eyes widened. Are you saying, I love you too, Samuel Reynolds, Hannah said, her voice steady despite the tears now flowing freely. I think I began falling in love with you the moment you pulled me from that quicksand, and I've only fallen deeper since. With gentle reverence, Sam reached up to brush away her tears. Then, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward and kissed her. It was a tender kiss, full of the emotion that had built between them over months of friendship and growing affection. When they parted, Sam rested his forehead against hers. I never imagined when I heard your scream that day that it would lead to this moment. Hannah smiled through her tears. God works in mysterious ways, it seems. Even quicksand can be part of his plan. Sam chuckled, then grew serious again. Hannah Owens, I don't have a fancy speech prepared or a ring yet, but will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not for the ranch or the business partnership, but because I want to build a life with you by my side. Hannah's answer was another kiss, this one filled with the promise of a future together. When they finally separated, she said, Yes, Samuel Reynolds, I will marry you. And not for any practical reason, but simply because I love you and can't imagine my life without you in it. They were married in the spring, when the prairie bloomed with wildflowers that rivaled the beauty of Hannah's bouquet. The entire community attended Hannah's students and their families, the ranch hands and their loved ones, townspeople who had known Thomas Owens and welcomed his daughter home. Mrs. Hawkins, beaming with satisfaction at the match she had subtly encouraged, served as Hannah's matron of honor. Jim Peterson, who had proven himself an excellent manager of the hardware store, stood as Sam's best man. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, each promising to love and support the other through whatever challenges life might bring. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Sam's kiss was both tender and possessive, earning good-natured cheers from the assembled guests. The celebration afterward was a true frontier affair, tables groaning with food contributed by every family, music provided by local fiddlers, and dancing that continued well into the night. Hannah, watching her new husband laugh with friends as he accepted congratulations, felt a deep contentment that she had never known in Boston's more refined society. Later, as they drove back to the Double R, now truly their home together, Sam took her hand. Happy, Mrs. Reynolds. Hannah squeezed his fingers. Happier than I ever thought possible. And you? I keep thinking about that day with the quicksand, Sam admitted. How close I came to losing you before I ever really found you. It makes me grateful for every moment we have together. Hannah leaned her head against his shoulder. "Then we'll make each moment count, won't we?" As the years passed, the double R prospered under their joint stewardship. Hannah continued teaching until their first child was born, a son they named Thomas, after her father. A daughter followed 2 years later, whom they called Alina in honor of Mrs. Hawkins, who doted on both children as though they were her own grandchildren. Hannah never regretted her decision to remain in Nebraska rather than return to Boston. The life she built with Sam was richer and more fulfilling than any she might have had in the East. Together, they weathered the challenges that came with ranching on the frontier: drought years and harsh winters, fluctuating cattle prices, and the gradual encroachment of farmers onto what had once been open range. Through it all, their partnership, both in business and in marriage, remained strong. They complemented each other perfectly, Sam's practical experience balanced by Hannah's educational background, his sometimes impulsive nature tempered by her more measured approach. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the day's work done, they would often sit together on the porch, watching the sun set over the prairie that had brought them together in such an unlikely way. "Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been if I hadn't taken that wrong turn and found that quicksand?" Hannah asked on one such evening, her head resting comfortably against her husband's shoulder. Sam's arm tightened around her. "I try not to. The thought of never knowing you, never having our children, never building this life together, it's too painful to consider." Hannah nodded. "I feel the same way. It's strange to think that the most frightening moment of my life led to my greatest happiness." "That's often the way of things," Sam replied thoughtfully. "The most significant crossroads aren't marked with signposts. We only recognize them in hindsight." Hannah thought about the young woman she had been, terrified and sinking into the prairie's deadly embrace, and the man who had risked everything to save her. How neither of them could have imagined where that moment would lead. "I'm glad you heard my call that day," she said softly. "I'm glad you were brave enough to come after me." Sam kissed the top of her head. "I'll always come after you, Hannah Reynolds, no matter what." It was a promise he had kept from the beginning, from that first desperate rescue to the countless ways, large and small, that he had shown his devotion over their years together. And Hannah knew, with the certainty that comes from a love tested by time and strengthened by shared purpose, that it was a promise he would continue to keep for all the days of their lives. As the last light faded from the sky, they remained together on the porch, watching as stars appeared one by one above the land they both loved. The Double R Ranch spread out before them, a testament to what they had built together: not just a successful cattle operation, but a home, a family, a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And it had all begun with quicksand and courage, with a desperate cry for help and a man who didn't hesitate to answer. Sometimes, Hannah reflected, the most unexpected beginnings led to the most beautiful endings. Or rather, not endings at all, but new chapters in a story that continued to unfold with each passing day. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, the sound echoing across the prairie. Sam and Hannah Reynolds listened together, their hands entwined, their hearts beating as one beneath the vast Nebraska sky.